We are back live. I really love this music in the build-up. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final panel. It couldn't be more final. It's the grand finale, final day, final panel, final everything. We are about to wrap up. I think what's been an amazing week of platform engineering. Super fun. There were a lot of in-person events, virtual workshops, talks all the time, action in the Slack, super cool. And so I'm really happy that we get to wrap this up together. We tell us in the chat, I know that this is live in a few places on the YouTube and LinkedIn, on the Slack. So wherever you are, just tell us where you're joining from. And as usual, if you have any questions, any topics that you want us to cover, just drop in there. We'll try to discuss it as we go through. What we're discussing today, right now, is what's hottest in platform engineering. In general, I think it would be great to take a look back at the week. What were the highlights? What are some of the things that we want to discuss? Looking back, but also looking ahead in platform engineering, and what's hottest and what the future holds. So to do that, I'm joined by Cansu, who's a senior solution architect at RedHat. Hey, Cansu, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. How about you?
Good to see you. Ajay, who's the head of platform engineering at Thoughtworks. Hey, Ajay, good to have you.
How are you?
And finally, James, who's a solution architect manager and big platform engineering advocate at Google.
Hey, great to be here.
Cool. So before we jump into the juicy bits, I thought it would be fun to just have a quick kind of run around the horn on the highlights. So your highlights of the week, whether it was talks or events that you attended or anything else in between. What do you have? Ajay, why don't you kick us off?
Absolutely. This has been a phenomenal week, right? I mean, so when you were actually doing all the build-up saying that we got 35,000 attendees coming in, I was thinking, yeah, this is not going to be as big as last time. But I mean, I was so wrong. It was amazing energy across the board. The kind of presentations and everything was just out of this world. And I did talk to some of the folks who attended live events, and the energy there was something else. And unfortunately, I couldn't do it. So before I tell the highlights of like what I found to be the phenomenal talks, I have to, confess that I haven't watched all the presentations yet. I mean, that's going to be my weekend activity starting tomorrow. But
wait, you haven't watched 156 talks?
No, I have not, right? So we've been playing in the background, right? So, but I want to call out like a few things, right? Just to give a shout out for some of the really unique ones, right? The first thing, if you haven't watched that conversation between Kelsey Hightower and Casper, definitely give it a go. There's some amazing thoughts being shared between them, right? And I will actually maybe start with a quiz. One of the things that Kelsey says that silos are good. Have you ever heard that before? If you haven't, go listen to that. He will explain why. So amazing stuff, right? That's more like a fireside chat. Another one that I think was phenomenal. Again, I'm a big believer in platform as product idea, and all of us are here. And so the talk by April on scaling platform teams with product and how does that work? I thought that was really good. April is from RIA Group, and again, she has some practical applications of doing it, because sometimes when we talk about platform as a product, the whole idea is that, yeah, conceptually it makes sense. How does it really work from a specific example? That was really good. Another one I want to call out, and this is from the folks at Humanitec. We keep talking about SCORE and the open source version of SCORE and things like that. The whole idea of like, how do you actually use SCORE in an open source workload specification? So essentially to achieve what we really want, essentially trying to reduce that configuration inconsistencies. Even my talk was mostly around that. And how do you actually make sure that we reduce those kinds of challenges for the developers? So this one, particularly by Ben and Susan, I believe, and I think was phenomenal. So I think definitely give it, prioritize that to the top of your list. The last one I want to call out is from Spotify, right? So what's platform engineering or developer experience without talking about Spotify. So they have this amazing talk on embracing GitOps at Spotify. So typically, I have a lot of people, including people in my team, when they first hear GitOps, GitOps, no, I mean, been there, done that, don't want to talk about it. But definitely give this a go. This is really interesting. They're talking about how they are using GitOps to manage infrastructure, builds deployments, as well as monitoring. So 4 highlights. I'm sure there's going to be 40 by the end of this weekend, but that's where I would start.
Awesome. Cansu, what do you got?
Yeah, cool. Oh, well, as just like Ajay, I couldn't watch the whole talks, but I did my best during the day, when, like in between meetings, when I had time. I had the YouTube on the background all the time. I was unmuting sometimes because of the work, but it was really great week. And actually, the most striking thing for me is to see that how this platform engineering and platform as a product idea like became like really a reality, more than just like some sort of a chant, some sort of a fancy stuff, the new hype. But like, it was amazing to see that people actually started talking about how to scale the approach, how to actually more focused on the measurement sides, because people started doing that, and now people more focused on how they can show more value of their platform initiatives. So there were some talks around like how to actually bring in the stakeholders in to more be involved, to help them to shape the product. Like there was this talk from Manuel Paye about these from fragile to unfragile platforms, and there he was really talking about really helpful ideas about how you can actually communicate the platform value with your CFO or some non-technical part of the organization. And also like there were really great war stories, like how the platforms were evolved over time within the organizations, like this talk from New York Times. And then when you actually watching this kind of talks, you see that like everybody actually like talking about people, process, and technology in all talks, no matter whether that talk was in the impact column or in just the cultural side or just the tech side. Everyone was touching on the people aspects and the process aspects a lot. So that was really made me happy. And there was this talk from Nikki Watt that explained the maturity model of platform engineering, this from the CNCF model, and how this can actually help people to create some sort of a roadmap. That was really helpful as well, because now that's the reality, now that's the thing. And then you also see that from last year, especially when you compare that, there were some neglecting around the infrastructure bits, and now that this focus is coming back, like how site reliability engineering practices can help people to actually create some resilience and reliable platforms. And because at the beginning, everyone was more focusing on the rightfully on like the developer experience parts on the container platforms, but then people started to see the shortcomings of neglecting the infrastructure bit, and it was really made me happy to see the talks around infrastructure side as well, like because infrastructure is the backbone of these things, and platform is like the interface. I heard it in one of the talks. I just cannot remember which one was that, but that was a really good call out as well about how the infrastructure has a play in all these as well. So I was really good week, and those things kind of like stuck with me throughout the whole week. Yeah,
that's awesome. James, what do you have?
I mean, there's a load of good ones there, right? Like, I'm not just gonna go through like all the same ones, but I would shout out like specifically the platform as a product piece, right? Like, it's fantastic to see that that's become the new normal in this space in a very short period of time. There's I guess an element here that's what really makes platforms instead of just shared infrastructure. That there is an element of when we're talking about platform as a product, that we're doing something different this time, right? We're not just rehashing those same things over and over. So, appreciate that from some of the folks here, right? But as well, like some of the talks from RedHat, for instance. But I like the way that even talks that weren't specifically about it kind of just viewed that as the norm, right? Like that I think is great. And then I think there's another piece, like in really in a few short years, we've kind of got to the stage where we're moving up the stack a little bit. It's not to diminish some of the work on the cool tech stuff. Like, I'm an infrastructure person. Like, I love building cool stuff. So that's not gone away, but it's become something that we're like, hey, we're now just fixing problems that we see at the same time, you know, it's great to see talks from some of the DevOps community. I love talking to Brian Fence. He's very no nonsense about some of these topics. So I love to see the DevOps community sort of looking at this and saying like, hey, some of this stuff isn't new. And it's like, no, it's not, right? Like, that's fine. What we're trying to do is iterate. We're trying continuous improvement. You know, all the things we learned from DevOps, right? We're trying to make things better. And so it's great to see those talks. It's great to see, you know, Steve, I know on the sort of value stream mapping piece, that couldn't be like any more relevant for platform engineering, right? If you're not doing some of those pieces, like how do you know you're building the right platform? Like, it's not obvious if we're not looking at our business stakeholders, you know. So great to see that. I love some of the insights. Gregor always gives some really good insights on sort of, you know, how things work, right? Like the meta view of platform engineering, I think, is still evolving. And so there's some great things there. And I'm still a Kelsey, like all the Google folks are still a Kelsey fanboy, right? So I get that, right? Where, you know, I love hearing his view on that sort of measured piece in terms of like where we are, where we're going, you know, and that was another exciting one for me as well.
Love it. All right, cool. I feel like we can just jump right in because there's some very interesting threads here that we can just start developing. And I think, you know, I mean, I feel like we've seen, you know, all like a good amount of key trends, like very clearly emerging throughout the week from more established ones, like the ones that you mentioned, like platform as a product, and maybe like reference architectures that have now been around for a year. And you could see, I think, like 15, 20 talks that actually show them and use them, to others that, you know, I think have been eating up in the last year, as especially, I think, as you're pointing out, right, as organizations are maturing in their platform engineering practice. And so I feel like we could actually start with maybe one of the most, I guess, fundamental features of platform engineering, which is platform as a product, right? Because it's really, I think, I mean, you've all mentioned it, right? But it's also what I feel like, you know, to your point, James, is kind of like distinguishes maybe some of the old iteration to this like newest iteration, right? I've actually I gave a talk on the Wednesday around like, you know, how platform engineering is effectively just like a reincarnation of DevOps, but, you know, maybe with this more of a product mindset. So why don't we kick off with that? Maybe actually just by giving a definition, Cansu, if you don't mind, like what is platform as a product? What do we mean? Why is it relevant? And maybe why is it different from, you know, what's new about it? Why should people that maybe come from different backgrounds should even care about this?
Well, in simplest term, platform as a product is basically bringing the product mindset into the platform engineering, into the developing the platform work. And the reason that people should care about this is mainly that the whole product mindset is bringing the users into the heart of everything. So it kind of starts from that you put yourself in the shoes of the users and then building the product, building your platform actually that kind of fit for the needs of like fit for their needs. So because before what we've been seeing in the organizations is that there is these IT organization, like there are some teams within the IT that are building their this platform or some processes by things that how they think is the best for them without actually really communicating, like without actually asking them how they would like to access to, you know, how they would like to onboard their applications, how they would like to access the platform and things like that, which kind of create a wall between them, like because really the whole point of in here is that bringing them as early on and then get their feedback as and then kind of shape your platform based on their feedback. And in the product mindset, it's not just the technology bit, but you kind of look at in the feasibility side of the product, like how this kind of fit in our organization, like what's the needs out there, what's the first features that we need to deliver. So kind of you are bringing your platform in a way that your actual developers want, your actual developers needs, and you kind of focus your backlog, you kind of focus your development efforts based on their needs and based on their requests. And developers are the heart of the platform, heart of the part of a product, but actually your other stakeholders there are these other stakeholders that you need to also bring into the game, that you need to get their feedback, that you need to get their buy-in, because also you know, they have these stakeholders who kind of pay for your platform, who kind of help you to shape your platform for things like whether it could be like security, compliance, regulatory type of things. And product mindset also helps you to keep them in mind, keep them in the loop all the time, and getting their feedbacks as timely or as early on, so that you don't have to go back and, I don't know, refactor it, or like building something that actually not fit for your organization, or it's not going to be used. So it's actually really helping you to reduce the effort and keeping your developers happy, because you are kind of developing the platform as a product incrementally, and delivering in a way that they would actually happily consume it. So kind of neglect the keeping this like possibility of that they're like gonna create some sort of shadow IT because your platform is not for their needs, or like they're becoming unhappy, and that leads them to be inefficient. Since you are caring about them, since you are showing care about them with this product mindset, by putting them on the heart of it, and putting yourself in their shoes, kind of you are really building something that is going to be useful for them. It's going to become something that they would love to use. So that's the main difference, I think, that building something with the good practices, but also you are building this thing based literally just fit for a purpose, literally fit for your target audience needs. So
yeah, absolutely. Where your audience, right, your internal customers, which ultimately are the developers, right? And I really, I feel like they're the kind of like the product mindset, right, is super important in this change. But the other thing is also, I think, what you're implicitly touching on, which is this communication, right? This being able to like bring all these different stakeholders on the journey with you becomes an extremely important role. Maybe it's, the platform product manager or the head of platform. Like there's, every organization has their kind of different role, but like some leader that not only is leading the team that's building the platform, but it's actually kind of leading the entire initiative across the organization and can speak the language of the different stakeholders, right? Because to your point earlier, Cansu, we sometimes forget about some of them, right? We forget, for instance, about the infrastructure people because we're so focused on the developers and so on. So how do you mediate that, Ajay, and how do you bring in like these different perspectives and what's important for these different stakeholder groups?
Absolutely. And great question, right? Because one of the things that we sometimes tend to get confused between is like when we talk about platform as a product, there is this mindset that, okay, this is an extremely complex task that's going to take a long time to do. First thing that we need to think about is that anytime you're building an engineering platform or any of these platforms, think about it from your minimum viable platform, an MVP idea. Because the idea is that if you can show that value soon, it becomes far more easier for you to build on it. Who are your stakeholders are. So typically the way we try and approach this is that we used to call this MVP idea, we used to typically call it like years back as internal accelerators, right? So teams here at Thoughtworks, we work with a lot of clients. So when we work with them, we actually build this internal accelerators. So it's a simple concept, right? Again, think of it like what we use as like blueprints and reference architectures and things like that, that we use more in the industry today. But if you have to go from 0 to 100 to build your complete set of capabilities that you want to build in your platform, how about if we actually provide you that accelerator, provide you that quick results by going from 0 to 30 right off the bat? That makes the whole process a lot more easier. So when it comes to the stakeholders, managing the stakeholders and bringing that kind of alignment among them, first thing we really need to think about is that what is it that's most important from a business value point of view? Again, see that I'm sort of translating that engineering requirements or the developer requirements to the actual outcomes. That is where that technical product management mindset comes in, and start with that. You should never really start with saying that, yeah, I'm going to actually build some engineering platform capabilities because everybody knows it. I'm sorry to say, no, not everybody knows that, right? So you need to start with your business value, work backwards, and say that how do you actually accomplish that business value? Because everybody can understand the whole idea of like increasing your revenues and reducing your costs, right? Starting as simple as that. Then think about what are those capabilities that you could build as part of your platform that will enable that. Then that in itself will have like tentacles, and that'll have like 20 different components to it, which will touch each of the different groups we talk about. It'll touch the developer teams, it'll touch the testing teams, it'll touch the compliance teams, it'll touch the governance teams. It'll touch every what we typically call as your NFRs, your non-functional requirements, because those are the kind of things sometimes developers struggle with, right? Because they know how to do their domain code, they know how to build the product, but if I have to do all these things with all these abilities that I have to think about, how do I do that? So ensure that your platform capabilities that you're building upfront is doing that, and make sure that your MVP is sort of covering that.
Love that. Love that. And so, I mean, you touched on this like blueprint idea, right? This reference architectures, and we've actually hosted a conversation at Google Next in Vegas with James a couple months ago, where we kind of went through, right, like what this, for example, what a reference architecture for Google could look like, right? But you could have any sort of blueprint on any cloud or multi-cloud hybrid and so on. And so, because I feel like you could, especially for newcomers, right? If it's not your first, if not the like the 10th platform that you're building, but it's like the first time, right? And you're like, all right, I get the hype, right? I get that we need to create this business value that you were talking about, Ajay. I get that we need to solve this problem, right? This lack of self-service and standardization that you mentioned, Cansu. But like, how do I get started, right? Like, I look at the CNCF landscape and it's like, boom, right? It's like completely overwhelming, and it's like, I get the ideas, but like, what does it look like in practice, right? And I mean, we have actually a full track on that at PlatformCon. It's called Blueprint, specifically for that reason. So like, how, what type of blueprints have you seen work, James? Whether it's, smaller teams or enterprise, how important are they? And, what's maybe some of the most interesting use cases that you've seen in terms of like, hey, this is really what helped align a bunch of people around, okay, like this is how you can kind of fit this thing together and have something that makes sense for our own needs, right? Because you have to tweak it for every organization.
Yeah, for sure. And then so I'll give a quick one for the lawyer cats first. I just like to say, like, this one's probably like, this is very much more my personal opinion. This isn't going to be the Google official one, and I think that might make this a more fun conversation. I think the key part there is, and I've worked a long time as an architect, right? And I'm okay with criticism that we're all there with the whiteboard pens and stuff like that. When we talk about like a modern architecture, the reality is that it should be more than just a whiteboard. It should be more than just a diagram, right? We encourage people. I certainly encourage people in my team and the teams around me. We try and build stuff. We try and build these architectures. We try and build demos or components that will work, right? That will provide tangible, practical solutions to problems. And so I think we've got a pretty strong steer that don't go back into the ivory tower. Don't look at what you think is perfect. I think there was a great talk. I think it's Kat Morris on like brownfield. It's 2024, right? Like there's no greenfield systems. That doesn't exist, right? Like, every time we speak to customers, that like, oh, should I build a new platform? I'm like, well, what about your existing one? Oh, right. Well, I don't like it, but it's there. Like, it exists. So you don't have the luxury of just going and getting one of these templates, speaking to the architects in the ivory tower, and then, deploying this greenfield thing that will be magic. Like, the reality of your workplace is that there will be a load of brownfield stuff you need to weave together, right? A load of capabilities that need to get done with that. So, I think the ones that have worked best are the ones which are pragmatic, composable. For a long time, we've asked our developers to work with things like microservices at scale. Where's our micro platforms? Like, it's almost like we're repeating the same lessons. Like, way too many times I go to customers and I'm like, what have you done? Why have you built this Teralith? Why is this giant monolithic Terraform thing existing here? Like, you should break this into smaller chunks. Let's do, and Gregor as well, like DDD. We know these lessons from the past around this. So, the best way of looking at architectures and reference architectures, this is a way of us seeing how things could look.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to compose that in our own environments. We're going to take the components that work for us, modular, composable, all the things we tell our developers to do. Why aren't we following our own rules, right? Where are the micro platforms? Like, we're not really good at that, and we've got to get better, I think, in those pieces. So absolutely don't start from scratch. Like, if you think like, no, this is my company's unique and custom, I don't need a reference architecture. Why not go look at one of the reference architectures? Why not go and look at and again, that's not just a Google Cloud thing. I'm keen to point out, like, we're comfortable with people have multi-cloud, right? There's a reality to the world. Some people have on-premise things. Like, that's okay. Go use one of those reference architectures for the right use case, for the right scenario, for the right things for your business. Don't go into the ivory tower. We've tried that. It didn't work. Use those things and think about composability. Think about how you take those and make them work in your brownfield environments. No one's building a platform from scratch in 2024.
Right. I love that. And I think that's actually one of the things that has been a much more active conversation in the community in the last 6 months or so, right? This idea of, like, at the end of the day, you should treat your platform as like you have a front end, you have a back end, right? And where do you start from, basically, right? And we've seen a lot of times in the community this tendency of, like, all right, well, just start from the front end because it's easier, right? Because it's just like you can just put something on top, to your point, James, of like, here's this existing whatever it is, let me put something on top and just say, hey, I'm doing platform engineering, this is great, right? And I have some like pretty dashboard that I can show to executives and so on. And the problem with that is that then as you're like, okay, now you're doing platform engineering, let's keep going. Then you keep, like, adding logic modules into a place that potentially shouldn't have logic modules, right? Because if there's one thing that we've learned, right, from like building microservice architecture and so on, is like you have this like single responsibility principle, and you should have like front ends and there shouldn't be back ends and so on, right? And so I think that's a very interesting thing that we've seen of people realizing, hey, I need to start, and it's interesting because we actually had an article published on platformengineer.org by Aaron Erickson. This is back 2-3 years ago. And Aaron was the leader of the internal platform engineering initiative at Salesforce. And he was saying, look, building a platform is kind of like building a house. If you don't want to start from like the door and the windows, right? You need to like build some sort of foundation first, and then add things later, right? And so similar thing with the platform, you kind of want to start from the back end and then work your way up to the different interfaces. So how have you seen that? Like, how important is that, Ajay? And how have you seen that like kind of like play out in the space right now?
This has what you just asked, right? I mean, this has got relevance far beyond, an approach to doing it. Let's just look at it from the point of view of economics, right? From the point of view of if you're asking an organization to invest in it, because there are some people who are innately motivated, who have attended conferences like PlatformCon and grabbed all this ideas and information, and are the decision makers in their organization to go make it happen. But then there is the other class, which is the majority of the people who are really interested in understanding all the kind of things that's happening. Now they have to go convince their organization, okay, here's how you should be doing it. So this is where a lot of the stuff that we're talking about would come into play, right? So what we are really talking about is that they have to go do two things. One is really make sure that they understand the value of what you're doing. There, some of the ideas that James talked about from this composable platforms idea would come in. But because what you really want to do at that point is not start from scratch and take for an infinite amount of time or like a more than a finite amount of time to actually go do this. So what you do is really start with articulating that value, saying, okay, here's the value that I could get out of it. And how do I do that? But I do that by creating, you look at your existing ecosystem. And again, the point James made earlier, right? there's no greenfield really. You already, if you don't know that you're using a platform, maybe you should go look at what you're doing one more time, right? Maybe you're already doing one. So look at that platform, look at your foundation, make sure that your foundation layer is set. And that's where you might actually get some pushback, right? So if you want to really do things right, we all know it takes more time. So if you're building your foundations right and then going to build the capabilities on top of it, you're probably going to get some pushback from the decision makers, the people who actually signed the check, saying that it's taking too much time, there's not enough value. So how about you look at it from a composable platform's point of view? You build your foundation, but at the same time start articulating the value with the integrations that you can do, with the reference architectures that you can do, with the blueprints that's out there. That becomes a lot more compelling argument. Now comes the actual value realization in that process. And as you can see, I'm sort of keep going back to this whole idea about make sure that your business sees the value, because I've been burned a million times with that myself. I'm sure a lot of this audience been too, right? We all go and do this best thing possible and only to get nuked, somewhere along the way. So when you look at the value, again, try and make sure that it's not just the developer value that you're really talking about. So we overemphasize on the fact that it's all about developers. Yes, it's all about developers. Now let's take a step back and redefine developers, right? What do you mean by developers in 2024? Are these people who are just going to be just the people who write those functional domain code, or all the people who actually support that overall ecosystem for your path to production? So think about value from the point of view of each of those people, each of those stakeholders in that thing. Then building your foundation would become a lot more sensible, because you're not going to build everything right off the bat. You're going to build those essential foundation layers that are needed for the capabilities that you're building, because your blueprints and your reference architectures are going to give you a lot of things out of the box that can help you show that value. So it's a question of creating that strategic mindset, as opposed to just let's go do something, let's go build something and get away with it. No, take that strategic approach. That doesn't always mean that you build. Again, we all believe in agile, right? All the time. And again, coming from Thoughtworks, I have to throw in this word agile a couple of times, right? Before I get out of this. So yeah, so have that agile mindset when you really think about this, and have your strategy be agile too, right? Not just your implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. And this I think we keep going back to this, just the importance of this cultural component, right? So many times, especially people that just entering the community, see are like, hey, what's the back tech stack? And very rarely that really matters, right? At the end of the day, it's more about how you get all these different stakeholders on board, and also how do you, we talked about minimum viable platforms, which is really the very beginning, but also what comes after that, right? How do you get the first team, and then how do you iterate from there? So Cansu, in your experience, how do you even identify if I'm a platform team and I'm building, should I onboard the first application and have it ready and then kind of get the developers on? Should I start working with the first team right away and kind of lighthouse or pioneer that with them? And then how do you move beyond that first team, right?
Yeah, I think there was a talk, I think it was from Humanitec, about the examples and stories, how they are really powerful about helping people to adapt the platform. So how do you start? And there is always some people that you can find, some teams you can find that these early adopters that you can they're eager to actually try, they're eager to be your testers, so to say. So be really take care about them, really hear about them, value about their feedback, and take them with you to the journey. So find these early adopters and actually do things with them and get listen them and make kind of follow this agile development process, Ajay called that, release early, release often, and basically nurture them and then use them to help you tell the stories, tell the success stories rest of the organization, so that they can become your evangelists within the organization. They can become your advertisers about the platforms, and the rest will hopefully get excited same like as excited as them, and they can also come and would like to try, and this will also give you more diverse audience and help you to actually tailor the processes to address more diverse needs, and they will help you to actually bring more workloads to the platform. Initially, always there will be some more hand holding. We always say that like platforms should be like self-service, like it's more API based, and it should be intuitive if in order to be called it a good platform. But at the beginning, like you are at the beginning of your journey, you are doing things like something new for your organization. So it's totally normal that you'll do some hand holding for some teams. So maybe you are gonna onboard some teams or the applications together with development teams, but you learn from that and you'll actually evolve your approach and make it more self-service. But it's totally fine to like have those people around and then actually share the stories. Like make sure that you have these success stories at the beginning, and then talk about this, amplify this, and the others will. I'm sure the others will follow. At least based on our experience, we always had this kind of an open door policy when we were building the platforms and the platform engineering teams. And there was always some teams coming in and asking us questions, understanding more. And at the beginning, we were always sitting shoulder by shoulder, and we were watching them how they would like to use the platform, what kind of things that they are really caring on the screen, and that's kind of like. Drop the number over the time because the platform became more intuitive and kind of like month-to-month verse, like people kind of helped each other, etc. So that's normal. Like at the beginning, you'll maybe you are the one deploying some stuff with them, onboarding stuff with them, but use that opportunity to learn and basically evolve your platform. Well.
Awesome. Okay, I feel like we've kind of covered like a good amount of ground in terms of like this is the core of how you build platforms, right? Like these are the core concepts that are really important. What are kind of the the hot shiny new things that you're seeing emerging in the space that are maybe like not as established yet, but feel like they have some interesting potential? James, what do you have?
So it's not going to be a talk in 24 without me saying AI. And again, like this is not Google. Google has a whole set of marketing opinions. You can go get that. We can talk about that separately. But my personal opinion, right? Like I have this conversation with a lot of people on where AI is, how that works, how does it overlay with platform engineering. Like if those topics haven't come up for you yet, like they're gonna. Like you're going to be having those conversations, right? We've got to be very clear about that. One of the things that I learned from, one of the sort of long-term Googlers in this space, Todd, was, there's really two types I think in this space that we should think about. One is like, to put it sort of, in a very simplistic way, there's AI for platforms, and I guess there's platforms for AI. And we've got to kind of break those two a little bit in, and obviously there's overlaps, right? We've got to think about that a little bit. So, one of the first things when people say, like, I really want to get a model running and I want to do some training, I need to build a pipeline, I'm going to need to hire a lot of data scientists. I'm like, really? You're going to need to hire a lot of DevOps people, right? Like this is ML ops is just DevOps with data, right? Like, and I'm aware, don't worry, that there's more complexity to that, but the core of it is not different. So we've got to get much better at when someone says like, well, should I do AI or should I do platform engineering? Stop. Hang on a second. If you want to do a lot of AI right now, you've got to get good at platform engineering. That's a really important topic. We should not be fighting each other. These are very complementary. And I think that's going to be a big one over the next couple of years is to stop thinking of those as in conflict and start saying like a really good platform will be a big differentiator for you in terms of rapidly deploying AI in your organizations. All of the bits that we talk about, security, compliance, guardrails, golden paths, critical for those systems. People are like, how do I trust my models? How do I know they're doing the right things? Where is my data being stored? Is PII, regulatory compliance? These are all the things that we can put into our platforms. Let's do that, right? Like, let's be friends. There's no need for us to be competing with each other in these spaces. And that's really the sort of, how we use platforms for AI. There is a whole nother thread, and that is AI for platforms. And people are like, well, maybe I don't need platform engineers, right? Because I'm just going to get AI to do it. Maybe, right? Like I can't predict the future. That's entirely feasible. I think what I can say is, and I love the Bill Gates quote here, which is, we have very different views of, like, how we predict timelines, right? And I think his view, in short, was, we always overestimate the change of the next couple of years. We always think that a lot's going to happen in the next couple of years. We always underestimate what's going to happen in 10 years' time. And actually, I think, a lot of things are going to happen in 10 years' time are going to be very transformative. But in 2 years' time, I'm still going to be having this conversation. I'm still going to be saying, like, please get your data hygiene in a good space. Please use version control. Like, if you're a data scientist and you're not using version control, today's the day. So, some of those basics still need to continue. And I think that will also be the 2-year, 10-year view, I think also needs to be, very much looked at. And I think the final thing that we often talk about a lot is the platform itself, the microservices that exist in your organization, the culture, this sort of soup. We're starting to think of that more as an ecosystem, right? Less as a sort of rigid set of technical things that we build, and more as an ecosystem, like part of the things that have grown up over time, new things we're introducing to the ecosystem, a mesh of all those components together. And instead of taking these systems and trying to break them into components and tackling them in a very sort of traditional engineering way, what if we looked at it as a complex adaptive system? What if we looked at all these things as a wider ecosystem? I think that's going to be, especially very large companies, especially with a lot of technology, we've got to look at an ecosystem model and not as like a very precise, again, ivory tower prescriptive model in that space. So I think you'll hear the word ecosystem from me a lot going forward, and I think you will from others. But the concept, I think, is more important than the wording.
And when you think about like AI for platforms, right? Like, is it mostly, and especially obviously the old like LLM thing, is it mostly kind of like the interface bit of it in your view, or?
I think the crucial bit is that the event horizon of this is very difficult. It's very short, right? So it's very difficult to tell what value is in some of these pieces. And we know from the sort of tech adoption journey that often the things that end up being valuable aren't the things we thought immediately were, right? When we didn't think of that Amazon would be a thing when we made the internet, like we're like, what does that mean? Like what? So the things that will probably become important there right now, I speak with SRE colleagues and they're like, I'm going to get an LLM and it's going to look through my logs. And I'm like, that's great. Immediate results. I see that's great. Is that the thing in 2 years' time or 10 years' time? I don't think so. I think there's more to that, but the event horizon is too short for us, I think, in that. And so back to what do? We do an MVP. We try stuff, we continuously improve, and when we go through that iteration journey, rather than trying to pick the winner now, which I don't think we're going to be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's some wise words, James. Ajay, what do you think? What does the future hold as we're wrapping up here? Because I've realized this is actually supposed to go 45 minutes, not 1 hour.
Yeah, I'll quickly go through it. I mean, there are some, you could probably talk about this specific topic for 5 hours, right? I mean, there's so much of things that's happening in the space. So I'm going to completely gloss over the DX, the developer experience part, as well as the platform as a product. Now, Cansu covered a lot of aspects on our platform as a product. So those two things, you cannot actually ignore that. And when we talk about this, what's hot, right? Because those are the kind of things we talk about. But let's talk about a few other things. James did give a good overview of composable platforms. To me, that is going to be the huge future, right? So what we are really talking about is this, flexible modular architecture that enables business as a whole to adapt quickly to changing market conditions, right? It's not about, again, see, I'm not talking about the engineering. I'm talking about the business at that side. So this would be a huge part of how we really start thinking about platform and platform engineering as we move forward. Another one closely related to that, and I was going to call it a very, close cousin, connected platforms, right? So as you start creating composable platforms, you really, and we also talked about there is no greenfield anymore. Yeah, this concept of connected platforms is going to be huge. So this is where you're really building synergies, connecting your, your digital assets, your physical assets, because some of the places where we are applying platform engineering is no longer this old, or the newer digital native kind of places, right? We are talking about really old, traditional 100-year-old companies who are actually doing this. So they got lots of different assets that would really require that operational efficiency. Those connected platforms would be huge in making some of those kinds of decisions. Another one, you might find this surprising, right? We have been talking about, ever since the advent of cloud, we've been talking about ephemeral environments. I still find in my line of work, very few companies who are really doing this right. and everybody wanting to do it. I mean, the idea is fairly simple, right? You create your temporary isolated environments that you can quickly test and fix things. This has been a huge challenge. How platform engineering can influence that is going to be a huge part. This is exactly what we are hearing from the field. Similarly, on the developer side of things, I mean, again, don't need to talk about this explicitly, but always comes up, right? Kubernetes, everything is Kubernetes, but how do you make it more user-friendly? This is a struggle that nobody has gotten around to, right? We all are trying to do that, but that is a thing. Then the whole thing about, James brought up the whole thing about AI, but, I would even really look at it from the point of view of data side of things. So how do you create those personalized experiences using platforms? So, internally at Thoughtworks, one of the things we talk about is that we have this data and AI practice, and we have this platform engineering practice. We are always looking for ways to bring that together, because the platform engineering with data creates that highly personalized experiences. Specifically on the AI side of things, there are a lot of things that it touches, but I would specifically call out something like AI-powered observability, right? I mean, so how do you enhance your observability using AI? And that directly fits into the whole, pretty much all the different planes within platform engineering. Again, another one is composite AI, right? So again, we are really talking about generative AI more these days, but how about the causal AI and the predictive AI? Those kinds of things we have been using for years together, right? How do you actually create that composite system? And I think that is gaining traction. And over the next year, I would predict that, in 2025 PlatformCon, I would see definitely a lot more presentations on that one. This is a huge trend that is coming to us. So think of it like that composite AI. Ultimately, end of the day, I want to end with this particular thing that I've been talking about from the beginning. Essentially, like, organizations are looking for value. So where is that value coming from? The resilience with some kind of digital immune systems, right? You build all these things. Am I really seeing that value today? Or am I going to see the value 5 years down the road or 2 years down the road? Nobody's going to buy that. So creating those we have talked about always continuous monitoring, but more and fault-tolerant architectures. We have talked about all of that. How do you bring it all together under the umbrella of platform engineering? I think that is going to be the huge thing that brings it all together into the day.
Love that. Rapid fire. Cansu, any closing thoughts from you?
I'll be quick because kind of time. Because both Ajay and James already said great things, but I want to second on James' ecosystem point of view, because I think what we're gonna see next year's talks about, like, how companies created the platform teams, not a platform team, because the companies started to actually invest in platform engineering more and more, and they will realize that there are more actually streams, like value streams within the platform, their platform teams. So we'll see some probably like really nice stories around how they use some like event storming from domain-driven design to understand the boundaries of their platforms, and then establish those boundaries and actually form the teams focusing on those boundaries, and how kind of like an API-based integrations between those different streams, while it is being perceived as one platform, one entry point for the rest of the organization. So the investment will go like more and more, and then we'll see that how actually companies, platform teams being grown, and these all gonna depend on all this like composable part of it, like the blueprints will help on these things. So there is this one, and I think now that like everybody start focusing on the developer experience. That's one thing, and there are all these like great measurements about like how to measure developer experience. The second bit now that getting attraction is the stakeholder management, and I think we'll start hearing these like different measurements to actually showing the values, like what the business values of the platforms more and more, like how to communicate this with stakeholders. Hopefully the next year there will be great talks around that. So.
I love that. I mean, I feel like we could keep going for another like 20-30 minutes, but I think there was enough content for the week, and we all have homework to do over the weekend, especially Ajay needs to catch up with another 140 talks. But no, really, thank you for being a part of the community. Thank you for speaking on PlatformCon and being on this panel. I really think this community wouldn't be the same without the three of you. So thank you, Cansu, Ajay, and James. Thank you, everybody. This is officially a wrap. Let's all go have a beer this weekend. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.